was the action you took worth it? Good day, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Monday Morning Moments with Mark. I hope this finds you well, and I'm hoping you're enjoying your Labor Day if you celebrate that where you are. So, this week, as you saw in the open, we're going to be talking about whether or not certain things are worth it or not. But we always have to have the funniest thing, and this week I actually have something else I want to share with you. I just so happen to be wearing one of my very favorite shirts. I dream of a society where a chicken can cross the road without its motives questioned. So, when we're talking about worth, and we'll get into all those details here in a minute, but if the chicken wants to cross the road, it's not your place to judge the chicken. The chicken will determine if it's worth it or not. Hopefully. We'll talk about how the chicken might go about that and how you can as well. But first, we have to have the funniest thing. And the funniest thing is actually related to worth as well. So this week, Miss V was teaching in her class knife techniques. And she had two boo-boos, very minor cuts, but nevertheless, she uses sharp knives in her class. And she came home. She told me about this. Told me about the first one, and I said, "Well, it sounds like you handled it very well." I said, "How many students do you got?" She said, "100, however many she's got, 20 something." I said, "So just under 1%." She goes, "Yeah, that's pretty good, huh?" I went, "That'll shut Disney World down in one day. You might want to tighten up." So she laughed at me, and then a couple days later, she told me about the second boo boo, and I said, "Yeah, you would definitely get shut down if that was Disney World." So I think she's already ordered the safety gloves off of Amazon. If not, they will be ordered soon. So she is rectifying that, but it was pretty funny for me to. She thought she was doing pretty good, not by Disney World standards. So, anyways, moving on to talk about worth. So as I talk about the chicken, and why he crossed the road, and it's, don't judge his motives and why you want to do it. Motives come from values, and we're going to talk a little bit about that values here in a minute. But it's not really anyone's place to judge why someone, or in this case, a chicken something, decides whether or not an action is or is not worth it. Worth is what we can do. Let me back up here a minute. What we can do is outsiders can offer suggestions, alternative ideas, alternative solutions, different ways of considering things. But ultimately, worth is determined internally, whether it's self or within a family unit or an organization, whatever size that might be, even if we're talking about the whole country, whether or not something is worth it is determined by the values hierarchy that self or organization, family unit, whatever the case may be, whatever that values hierarchy is, determines whether or not something is worth it. So if you want to think about this in financial terms, the value that you have on something, or in this case, values, and how important they are, will determine whether or not this action is worth it. Sticking with the financial analysis, unless you are an independently wealthy person, which I don't think any of my viewers are. If you are, I'd like some sponsorship. But besides that, all of us have this financial worth analysis where we have a certain price point for whatever the purchase may be that we decide it's no longer worth it. The value of this item is not worth X amount of dollars. The capacity that we could do with that money might be able to give us greater capacity and fulfill greater life value somewhere else. What is interesting about that is when we're talking about money and the consumer side of that, and worth of something, we allow marketing psychology to both effect and affect our consumer decisions. But my question is, do you put the same kind of effort into your personal behavior analysis that you do into your consumer behavior analysis? Probably not, or at least not as evident. You may do it, it may be a subconscious process. But it's usually not as conscious of a process. And within my family, we're trying to get more and more in the habit of verbally having that values conversation. I'll give you two examples of whether or not something was worth it or not. I have a tendency to put my value of accountability much higher than my value of tranquility, which I will cause some chaos over some accountability because I don't care much about the tranquility. My value of accountability significantly higher, and sometimes that one gets me in trouble. Another one that'll get me in trouble, kind of like maybe some of Miss V's students might have been thinking about, I don't know, or maybe they weren't thinking at all, is I let my value of knowledge supersede my value of safety. So sometimes I'll do some dangerous stuff to figure out outcomes. I've gotten better about it as I've gotten older, but I still like to know things. So I'm an inquisitive, investigative type, and I sometimes, or actually frequently, place that over my value of safety. I've just gotten better about the way I do it. Anyways, that's two examples of that. So when I'm like literally in the process of doing something, we'll have a values hierarchy analysis verbally out loud in the moment to determine whether or not, and sometimes it's a after the fact analysis of why I did a certain behavior, figuring out what value drove that decision or what value drove that behavior to figure out whether or not the certain action was really worth it or not. And if it was, then, okay, justified, understood, and I know why it was a great values based decision. If not, then what caused me to be out of alignment? Same thing I do when I'm actually going to make, purchases. Don't only consider the financial aspect of it, but also, okay, what need is this fulfilling? What value does that align to? And what am I giving up in exchange for that? How am I placing this in the hierarchy? Final example I'll use is we just recently bought new furniture for our younger son's room. And I had to think about, I swore no more major purchases until I get my shed. Well, that was 2 ago now. So I had to think about it. Well, okay, what's the need? What's the priority? And ranking those kinds of things into what personal value within me it strikes a chord to. And I'll get my shed sooner or later. So it's all good. But I want you to take some time this week. Think about those kinds of things. Think about some of the decisions you're making, whether it be financial purchases and you're doing price comparison shopping. Attach a personal value to it and figure out whether or not it really is worth it to you. And also take some time to reflect on other behaviors in your life and figure out what drove that and was the action you took worth it? I don't know. Think about it and have a great week.